If I said 9/11, what would you say? Now remember, this is a dialogue, not just a monologue. So if I said 9/11, what would you say? Twin Towers. All right, the terrorist attack that happened on September 11th, 2001, almost 3,000 Americans lost their lives. It was a seismic shift, and it changed, a cataclysmic change, the way that we live life, particularly in the way that we travel by air. If I said BC AD, the historical dividing line of history, what would you say? Before Christ, after his death. Thank you, James. Now, I understand that there are some secular historians that would prefer BCE, before Common Era, but for millennia, it was before Christ, after his death, because the birth of Jesus Christ, the life of Jesus Christ, the death of Jesus Christ is a dividing line in history, life on one side, life on the other side, a seismic shift, cataclysmic change. Then lastly, if I said COVID-19, what would you say? Lockdowns. Somebody said lockdowns. Okay, Tyler saying lockdowns. And this generation, millennials, Gen Z, Gen X, will forever see their lives as pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. There was a life pre-pandemic, life post-pandemic, seismic shift, cataclysmic change. How should the church adjust? And so we're going to meet a person this weekend who was experiencing in Israel seismic shifts. Israel was experiencing cataclysmic change militarily, spiritually, economically. And God used a gutless guy by the name of Gideon to get them back on track. I want to talk a little bit about how he did that. This weekend concludes our series on the pillars. And we have talked about these 4 pillars. I talked about worship the first week. Pastor Chad talked about community the second week. Elder Betty Ann Milligan talked about service the third week. And then Eli talked about generosity last week. And this week I want to talk about priority. The priority of the pillars is discipleship. Discipleship and evangelism are embedded in the pillars to go and make disciples of every ethnicity. And whatever else a disciple is a growing, gracious imitator of Jesus Christ in every area of life. And when I am practicing these pillars, then I am a disciple, a growing, gracious imitator of Jesus Christ in every area of life. I'm not perfect, but I'm making progress. And what we have talked about is, to the extent that you prioritize one of these pillars or more, is to the extent that you will experience, I will experience peace, power, and purposeful living. If I prioritize more than one of these pillars, then I'll experience more peace, more power, that's the ability to get things done, and more purposeful living. And I don't know anybody who doesn't need more peace and more power and more purpose. And so we will take a look at this person by the name of Gideon and how he can instruct us here today. First, I want to show you some photos. Do you remember this? Can you remember when there were 3 channels, ABC, NBC, CBS? If you can, raise your hand. Yeah, y'all dating yourself. That's good. I only know it because I'm a student of history. And I read that that was the case. But then today we have unlimited channels. Unlimited channels. I can watch Law and Order anytime I want. Yeah, that's good. Thank you, Eric. I can watch Law and Order anytime I want to. I don't even have to wait. It just changed things, and we have to adjust. How about this? Has this changed? The way people dress for church? That has changed. I got so many suits and ties and coats that I cannot wear anymore except for special occasions, because the way we dress for church has changed forever. How do we adjust? How do we adjust? And what about this? Can anybody remember phone booths and yellow pages and white pages? Yeah. Can you remember that? Yeah. I was riding with my grandson, Malachi. He got in the car, and he took out his cell phone while we were on our way to his favorite burger joint in Houston. And I said, Mally, remember when you were Pops, we don't use the phone. We're just going to talk to each other. And he said, okay. He put the phone away. And he said, Pops, what did you do when you had to make a call or you had an emergency? I said, well, we stopped at the phone booth. This is his reaction. Because he had no concept of what a phone booth was. So we deviated from where we were going. I took him to a place in Houston on San Felipe. They had preserved some historical phone booths just for posterity. And I got out and I said, hey, this is what we have to do. Here's a dime, here's a quarter. We got out and we dialed the phone, rotary, which he had never seen. He said, you are joking me. I said, no, sir, this is it. Seismic shift, cataclysmic change. How do we adjust? Now, how about delivery of products and mail? Has that changed? Yeah, no more horses and buggies. That has changed dramatically. So how do we adjust? Someone has well said, in matters of principle, you stand like a rock. In matters of taste and style, you swim with the currents. In matters of principle, you stand like a rock. In matters of taste and in style, you swim with the currents. Here's how the Apostle Paul said it. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win Jews. To those who are without the law, like one without the law. Not that I just broke the law, that I am without the law of God's law, but I'm under the law of Christ, but to win those without the law. To those who are weak, that is spiritually weak, I became as spiritually weak, not being arrogant in their presence, in order to win the weak. In fact, I have become all things to all people, so that I may by every possible means save some. And this I do because of the gospel. That's how you adjust to change. A lot of change I don't like, but this I do for the sake of the gospel. And we're going to meet a young man by the name of Gideon in the midst of cataclysmic change in the nation of Israel. God used him to get the nation back on track. How did he do that? Well, let's pick up his story in Judges chapter 6. Then once again, the Israelites started disobeying the Lord, so he let the nation of Midian control Israel for 7 years. The Midianites were so cruel that many of the Israelites ran into the mountains and hid in caves. Joash's son, Gideon, was nearby threshing grain in the shallow pit where he could not be seen or heard by the Midianites. The angel appeared and spoke to Gideon. The Lord is helping you, and you are a strong warrior. And Gideon answered, please don't take this wrong, but if the Lord is helping us, then why are all these awful things happen? Why have all these awful things happen? And then we skip to chapter 7. When Gideon was getting ready to fight the battle, the Lord said to Gideon, your army is too big. Your army is too big. He said, I can't let you win with this many soldiers. The Israelites would think that they had won the battle all by themselves, that I didn't have anything to do with it. Your army is too big. Here is the sermon in a sentence today. We count numbers, but God makes numbers count. We count numbers, but it's God who makes numbers count. In other words, we count failures, but God makes failures count. We count dollars and cents, but God makes dollars and cents count. We count what's happening in the here and now, but God is focused on now what? We count numbers, and God makes numbers count. So how did Gideon get so much done with so few people? Here's one. Gideon's crisis revealed laxity, his doubts. It took a crisis to reveal his laxity, meaning he was too relaxed. He was too comfortable. And it took a crisis to shake him and to wake him. Here is what the text says. Then once again, the Israelites started disobeying the Lord, and so he let the nation of Midian control them for 7 years. The Midianites were so cruel that many of the Israelites ran to the mountains. They hid in caves. And Joash's son Gideon was nearby, threshing grain in the shallow pit where he could not be seen or heard by the Midianites. And then the angel appeared and spoke to Gideon, the Lord is helping you, and you are a strong warrior. Gideon answered and said, please don't take this wrong, but if the Lord is helping us, then why have all these awful things happen? That crisis revealed that Gideon was lax spiritually. He had grown lazy spiritually. And that's what a crisis does. It's either going to draw us to God or drive us away from God, but it's going to reveal our spiritual laxity or our strength. Gideon had forgotten about the goodness or the faithfulness or the power of God. It took a crisis in order to help him spiritually reboot. Now, if I'm being honest with myself, every now and then I need a crisis to help me spiritually reboot. You don't have to say amen. I think you do too. If I'm being honest, every now and then I need a crisis to help me spiritually reboot. And that's what Israel was experiencing. But they had gotten dull. They had become doubtful. And this crisis revealed that. 15 years ago, not 5 years ago, 15 years ago, we started seeing trends of millennials, Gen Z, and alphas coming to church or attending church less frequently. It didn't just happen during COVID. It started happening 10 years before COVID. COVID only revealed what was already happening, but we were too lax. We were dull. We did not see the trends, nor did we want to see the trends. We were ignorant or willfully ignorant because at the time, the numbers were good. And it lulled us into a false sense of security. And we did not begin to think about how can we reach a new generation with the glorious gospel? How can God help us refresh the gospel, not compromise it, but refresh it in a way that this generation, the next generation, can see the wonderful power of the gospel and how it makes life worth living. It took a crisis for us to begin to look at it afresh. It did for me because I had grown too comfortable. That's what was happening in Israel, and that's one thing Gideon teaches us. Here's the second thing. He acknowledged his inability. Gideon acknowledged his inability. This is not always negative, to acknowledge your inability. He acknowledged it. In fact, Gideon replied, well, but how can I rescue Israel? How can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest one in Manasseh, and everyone else in my family is more important than I am. And the Lord answered, you can rescue Israel because I am going to help you. Defeating the Midianites will be as easy as beating up one man, because I am going to help you. Gideon acknowledged his inability. Gideon said, you got the wrong person. First of all, our clan is the smallest tribe in Israel. Our family is the least in that smallest clan, and I'm the youngest in that clan. 3 strikes,